Hello, today we are going to talk about conceptual change, what conceptual change is, why it's necessary in adapted physical education, and then the components that are necessary in order for conceptual change to occur. First, we will talk about what conceptual change actually is. And it is the idea that a learner needs to restructure their preconceptions or preconceived notions to accommodate new information or concepts. And this information comes from Tippett in 2010. The conceptual change model also has several different components that need to be discussed and defined. First, there are two different stages of conceptual change, and the first stage is called assimilation. That is basically where learners use what they know and what they understand as truth in order to help them process the information that they are taking in and new things that they're learning. The second phase is called accommodation, and in this phase the learner may have existing knowledge, but in this case the existing knowledge that the learner has does not help him or her learn the new idea. And so in this case the learner will have to reorganize his or her thinking processes and what he or she believes to be true. Also, one thing to remember is that whenever a learner is presented with a new concept, the learner has to use the prior knowledge or experiences that he or she has had in life, and from those experiences then try to understand the new concept that is being presented to them. And one other thing to keep in mind is that conceptual change is also influenced by the learner's motivation and by what happens with peers in the classroom and also between the learner and the teacher. So in this case, this will be more relevant to classroom settings rather than a scientific community, but this is going to be more relevant to what I'm going to talk about today. So in adapted physical education, we are all about change. And basically, when you think about the word adapt does mean to change or modify. So a lot of times when you tend to think about people with disabilities, we come into our experience with people who have disabilities thinking about the fact that they do have that disability. And if you were to define disability, it essentially could be a lack of ability. And so a lot of times people have that preconceived notion that somebody with a disability is not able to be physically active or play sports or anything like that. So as instructors, it's our job as physical education teachers, as adapted physical education teachers, to help people experience different active learning opportunities where they can see these things in action, where they can actually see people with disabilities engaging in sports and being physically active and able to be successful in just various stages of life. And as teachers, it is our job to challenge what our learners know and to help them to grow as individuals. And it might take them out of their comfort zones from time to time, but it is something that's important to provide an accepting and encouraging environment where students are first challenged to think about these new concepts with an open mind, but we also want to make it a safe environment where they're able to share their thoughts and their ideas and maybe even share some experiences that they've had in the past. So for me, the way that I design my instruction environment has a very large role in how my students learn. And so when I design different learning activities, I try to make them as realistic and relevant as I can to experiences that they might have in their life or in their future careers. Posner and colleagues presented the conceptual change model as having 3 or 4 different concepts depending on who you talk to. And basically this model understands that there are different situations where a learner will be able to deal with the new concepts through assimilation, but there are also going to be situations where the learner will not be able to accommodate new concepts due to just not having the knowledge and the experiences necessary to process that information. So there are several conditions that need to be able to take place before accommodation will actually happen for that learner. So first, the learner has to have some sort of dissatisfaction with the concepts that he or she currently knows. Basically, an individual is not going to want to change unless he or she realizes that there's something wrong with the current concept or what they believe. Second, the learner needs to be able to understand or grasp the new concept. So it's important for us as teachers to make sure that we articulate and explain that new concept well, because if the learner does not understand the concept, then he or she is not going to want to learn it. Third, the new concept has to make sense, and it needs to be something that would seem realistic, that it actually could be true. And then fourth, the concept needs to have the potential to be further explored and offer additional areas for investigating. Now we're going to talk about how conceptual change could occur in an adapted physical education class. In this case, this would be me teaching future teachers, so these will be undergraduate physical education students. They might be sports science majors who will go into physical therapy or occupational therapy. But in this case, a lot of them have never had experiences with people who have disabilities. So you can see here in the picture, this is a man who is blind, and he is actually playing a sport called goalball. And a lot of times we may think that people who are blind are not able to participate in sports because they can't see what's going on around them. But this is not always going to be the case. Similarly, if you think about Christopher Reeve, he was paralyzed. If you remember, he fell off a horse and broke his neck. And you can see in this picture, he is in a wheelchair. He's quadriplegic and has a breathing tube through his trachea. So a lot of times what we tend to think of for quadriplegia is that an individual is paralyzed in all four of their limbs. And the picture that comes to mind when I think about that is Christopher Reeve. To be quadriplegic, all it means is that somebody has some sort of a disability in all four limbs. So it could be that I've had both hands and both feet amputated. It could be that I have no use of my lower limbs and some use of my upper limbs. It could be that I have cerebral palsy. Maybe I'm able to walk, but all four limbs are affected. Maybe I had polio. There are a lot of different disabilities that would put somebody in a wheelchair. Maybe some of the time they might be able to walk part of the time. It just depends on the level of disability, and it does not necessarily mean that they are completely paralyzed in all four of their limbs. But again, this is something that when you hear the word quadriplegia, you tend to think of a quadriplegic as being paralyzed in a complete manner, such as what you see here in the picture with Christopher Reeve. So there are actually many different sport opportunities for people who are quadriplegic. And so one of them is called quad rugby, wheelchair rugby. In the past it was called murder ball. And it is an amazing sport. You can see here in the picture that it's pretty intense, to be honest. And, look at the guy on the left. He is probably going to get hurt pretty bad. But this is a sport for people who are quadriplegic. So again, you might have somebody that's had all four limbs amputated and they're able to play. You might have somebody that was in a car accident or an ATV accident. They broke their neck, they're paralyzed, have some use of the upper body, no use of the lower body. But there are many, many opportunities for people who have quadriplegia. I have a friend who is quadriplegic. He was in a car accident and was hit head on and broke his neck. And he plays quad rugby. He also does powerlifting. He's competing in a strongest disabled man competition. He also is what he calls a runner, but he competes in different races. So he, races his wheelchair. And the latest thing that he's done is a track and field type event where he did shot put. I believe he also did the javelin throw, and there are other sports, but those are the two that he actually did. And keep in mind, this is a man who is quadriplegic. I went out to lunch with him yesterday, and he drove. So it was a definite cool experience for me, just because It's something I've never done before. I've never ridden with somebody who is quadriplegic, and it was interesting to see how the car has been changed in order to help him be able to drive. And it's really cool just to see somebody with a disability overcoming a lot of people's beliefs about how, if you're quadriplegic, you're not able to do anything. And it essentially helps him feel empowered. He doesn't feel helpless. He's a student here at Wright State. He does a lot of really cool things. And he comes and speaks in my classes just to show my students that, hey, you know what? Yeah, I have a disability, but I don't let that stop me. I live on my own. I do sports. I drive. I'm in the master's program. He said he wants to get his PhD. So that's a great example of somebody with quadriplegia who rises above the preconceived notions and actually is living his life to the fullest.